A while back, I made a short asking people to name 3 players that are better than them that they watch to learn more about their weapons, and it was pretty revealing. To be clear, that's not to say that I learned anything about which top players to watch. I don't have 3, but ProChara is someone I watch for Splatana Stamper and general tips for weapons. My new main is Range Blaster, so ProChara. I don't have 3, but ProChara! Sword Supremacy. ProChara plays Splatana Stamper. ProChara! ProChara for Stamper. ProChara for Octobrush and Splatana Stamper. I have 2, you and ProChara. ProChara brushes. Pritchard does Stamper. So his name is ProChara and he's really good with the Splatana Stamper. And I'm maining Splatana Stamper at the moment. Why has no one mentioned ProChara? Y'all, there's so much overlap between his channel and mine that he shows up on this list twice. We know about ProChara. Now, that's not to say that ProChara is the only player who got named in these 500-some comments. He was only in 49 of them. But there are clearly some big gaps in people's knowledge of the competitive scene. There were dozens of people who named Chase247 for Tetra Dualies, and Chase is a great resource to learn from, but he, like me, who also got named a lot, guys, they already found my channel, this is not helpful, is not anywhere near the best at his weapon. A lot fewer players listed Isabel, even though Isabel is a Division X level player whose team, New Meta, recently had a great showing at a Squid Junction event, beating other Division X teams like Seafoam, losing only to Crush Soda and a top level Japanese pickup. I didn't see anyone listing Orion of Graveyard Shift, a top level European team. I don't think anyone even mentioned FLC, he's even a streamer, and he's also played a decent amount of Tetras on stream, though he's been playing more Machine lately. I'm not much of a tournament organizer these days. I haven't been seeding brackets and learning team and player names. I'm not like Popgun, who has predictions for the various Ludi Division playoff contenders that he can rattle off at a moment's notice. I'm not super knowledgeable about top players, but I barely learned anything from the comments. There's a common pattern that emerges very quickly when you think about the people who did actually get listed. It's not a list of top players at all. It's a list of Splatoon content creators. Yes, sometimes those two things overlap in players like Chara, Dude, or Kiver. But if those are your only points of reference, you can't name a single player who competed in the PAX East North American Championship that I analyzed in yesterday's video. Not a single member of Starburst, the undisputed best team in all of the Western scene, the people we all should be watching and learning from as much as we can. No one from Crush Soda, Sayonara, Destiny Bond, or, for good measure, even though these weren't at that tournament, Seafoam, Robbie and Tomodachi, Tempest, DNA, Chewits Mafia, any of the multitude of top-level teams that have not only competed in recent tournaments, but been streamed at recent tournaments that I personally have watched. There's a massive disconnect between top-level teams and up-and-coming players who are just starting to get interested in competitive play and coming here for tips. That's not the way it has to be. In the Melee community, one of the first competitive players I made contact with when I moved to Arizona was a top 100 player in the world. He introduced me to the best Mewtwo player in the world, 2 of the best Yoshi players in the world, the best Pikachu player in the world, and the best Ice Climbers player in the world. At my peak, I just eked out top 15 in the state on exactly one ranking period. But even before I was even that good, and I'm not particularly impressed with that, to be clear, I knew those players on a first-name basis. Just from memory, without having written this into the script, I'm going to name you 10 Melee Marth players who are, or at least have been, good enough to 4-stock me. Ken, Mewtwo King, PPMD, Pew Pew Yu, Zane, Rishi, Tai, Taj, Husband, Reeve. There we go, 10. Why don't we have that knowledge of the players in our scene? Why is it so much harder to find people to watch and learn from? I do have a few answers to those questions, but I don't want my answers to be the only ones we think about here. Get your own brains working too. Now, our scene is a bit smaller than the Melee scene, and whereas Melee has 26 characters, Splatoon 3 has 80 weapons. I'm going to ignore this, because it's still a big enough scene and has enough representation of different weapons that I don't think it should make this big of a difference. One really big reason is the relative difficulty of finding video footage. Part of the problem is that since it's a team game, it's a lot more cumbersome to include information about which weapons were chosen in the title. In the Melee community, people will title videos including the tags of the players and the characters that played in that set. It wouldn't be reasonable to list every weapon that gets played in a match of Splatoon, since there are 8 players and each of them has the option to change their weapon every game. In Melee, you can just type Melee Marth vs. Peach into YouTube and get Kadoran vs. Lod, Kadoran vs. Kalamazoo, Polish vs. Zane, all great top-level matches to learn from. But in Splatoon, the absolute state-of-the-art for YouTube uploads is to have the team names in the title. You have to know who's on that team and what weapons they play if you want to know what to search for. 2 degrees of friction that make the process way more difficult. This problem is actually really well addressed by a feature on Sendu.inc. If you go to that site and click the Videos tab, you can sort a large catalog of tournament VODs by weapon. A lot of people probably didn't know this feature existed, but now you do. You're welcome. But just because Sendu is carrying us this hard doesn't mean there isn't anything more we can do. Many tournaments don't even go so far as to individually upload sets. A lot of tournaments just publish one big 4-hour upload with no cuts or timestamps for us to sort through. Also, it often takes a month or more for the biggest tournaments we have to upload anything to YouTube. LTC VODs from last year got posted on June 9th when the tournament finished on May 2nd. At the pace Splatoon 3 is being updated, that makes it pretty likely that by the time videos get uploaded, the game has already been patched and rebalanced, so the footage isn't even useful anymore as a learning resource. If you're looking to get viewership on those videos, it's important to publish them while they're current. That'll encourage people to relive their favorite moments soon after they've happened, while they're still excited about that LAN, instead of giving them the footage so long afterward for them to be like, oh yeah, that happened. Wow, look at how bad I was at the game back then. I don't want to necessarily pin this on tournament production people exclusively. For one thing, because they have a thankless job and we need more of them, but also because it may not seem like there's much of an incentive to do all that work. If every tournament is going to bring a deluge of randomly selected tournament footage into your YouTube suggestions, who would subscribe to that YouTube channel? The big significant, exciting sets are probably going to get more attention, but overall a video is lucky to ever get a triple-digit number of views. As someone who did this work myself as part of my job as a Melee tournament organizer, for one thing, we got the workflow down for a one-night tournament to about 15 to 20 minutes of titling videos and batch uploading them, and they were usually up on YouTube the same day. It's definitely doable. But as for the reason to figure all that out and do it, I would point to players being so unaware of who our best players are and where they can go to learn from them. Sendu.inc took a huge step forward with this sorting system. If you want your tournaments to provide useful learning resources for up-and-coming players, get the videos uploaded in such a way that they can be used for it. But also tell your audience that they're available. Tell them about the YouTube channel, the Sendu.inc videos section. Make multiple calls to action on stream, reminding them that all of this exists for them. Because right now, no one is telling them and none of them know. Whether the YouTube channel itself becomes profitable or not, you will be performing the crucial service of archiving the scene's history and providing learning resources that players can use to improve. Imagine a world where the T-Tech players have better people to learn from than me. What a utopian place that would be. Something that we're starting to do better as a scene is, on the production side, doing more to communicate the narratives of tournaments. While people like Popgun have been doing great work to make people familiar with player names, team names, and tournament results for some time, there are a lot of ways to accomplish this. Big tournaments that have a little more time and ambition to play around with are doing things like post-match interviews that put faces and voices and personalities to players we've only known for their weapon choices and inkling hairstyles up until now. The Big House's interview segments deserve a lot of praise. They served as an excellent resource for me on my video on the use of GooTuber that we saw at that event. But that's the only event I've seen try it so far. I don't want us to lose that idea. What's crazier about it to me is that an in-person event thought to do it first. How did we live through a pandemic, moving school and doctor's appointments online, even for people who didn't know how computers work, and not end up in a world where we do interviews with players at online tournaments over Discord? They're already on Discord anyway, because they have to compete in the tournament and voice chat with their teammates. Just ping them or DM them and ask for a quick interview, run them through some quick ground rules about what's acceptable for them to say, and have them turn on a webcam if they're comfortable with it and put it on stream. Another area for improvement is on the part of the top players themselves. Granted, this is a group I don't want to level too many expectations at, given that they're already playing this video game more than anyone else on the planet. They're deep in the Splatoon community, and most of them have their primary circle of friends here. But it can be really hard to reach these folks sometimes, to even know who they are, and that's for a couple reasons. The first is that they're not making a lot of content. If top players only interact with people on Discord, well, a lot of the Discords they're in are exclusive, so they're just not going to run into any of the mid-level or low-level players who could really use their help. Even if you don't want to give away your strategies by putting scrim VODs online, literally just streaming a for fun Anarchy Open session, encouraging people to try and snipe you or something, joking around with the team, puts you out there, and people will click on it if you advertise that you're a top-level competitive team. Top Team Messes Around in Anarchy Open is a banger stream title. If you want to get even just a little bit more educational, people are going to eat that up. They already come to me, and I'm not as good at the game as you are. If you can offer them top-level insights, especially on weapons they don't see quite as often, you're going to have a niche on YouTube or TikTok. Remember, they come to me for T-Tech. They come to Chase247 for Tetras. If you can beat me or Chase247 and you play those weapons, go tell people how to play it better than I can. Also, YouTube Shorts are less than a minute long, and you can double up by uploading the same videos to TikTok. Some of the videos I've made have gotten tens of thousands of views after like 15 minutes of effort, most of which was just from subtitling them. The second reason I'm not seeing top players reaching out is a little bit of a deeper topic. I think the top level players in the Splatoon community can be a bit exclusive in an unhealthy way. There are some understandable reasons for this that I will grant them. For example, it's really frustrating having to deal with someone who thinks they know better than you when you have 100 times more hours in the game than they do. As a top player, you need top-level practice, so restricting the teams you're going to be playing against to just the teams that will actually help you improve may be easier if you just don't interact as much with teams that you can beat consistently. It's also aggravating when someone asks you to coach them, but then doesn't have the humility to acknowledge the real problems in their gameplay and isn't willing to change what you think is most important for them to change. Encounters with players like this can make stronger players a lot more careful about who they let into their social circles or who they take under their wing. It can understandably make them feel disdainful about those players. There are a lot of people you'll see in places like Reddit who have more casual mindsets and don't have the empathy or maturity to try and understand where competitive players are coming from, developing frustrating misconceptions about the scene. In such numbers that we find them, it can be easy to decide that we're just going to laugh at them, find humor in the way they are, instead of doing the emotional labor of trying to engage with and correct them. But I think we take that response too far, to a level that's not particularly mature, healthy, or conducive for our growth. It's really common for top players to troll people by expressing an ill-informed opinion about the game as if they're a more casual, less knowledgeable player than they are. Even if you don't end up accidentally convincing someone of that opinion and misinforming them, even if they eventually realize you're trolling, that can be an alienating experience. That makes someone that you fool less likely to ask you what you actually think, because they'll realize you've been making fun of them the whole time. The social gap between top-level players and lower mid-level players also means that it's way harder for anyone to actually reach top level and challenge those teams. In Melee, top players were willing to play against you at least some of the time. Sure, warming up for a tournament and doing what they needed to in order to play their best meant sometimes they would refuse practice with people they didn't know. But there was a culture of asking to plug your controller into a friendlies setup and people saying yes. If you were the better player, people would often ask for advice and it would usually be given. That culture doesn't exist in Splatoon. Want another good stream title? Top Level Team Explains How They're Beating You, where you get a list of low or mid-level teams, KO them in 1 minute, and then give that team 3 to 5 bullet points to improve on before moving on to the next team in line. Now you're in social contact with those lower mid-level teams and maybe making some friends in the process while not cutting too much into your weekly practice and still giving back to the community. helping teams rise up to the point where they might be able to challenge you one day. One other reason that people aren't finding top players to learn from might just be that they're not looking very hard. Sure, any amount of friction is something we as content creators and tournament organizers and production folks and top players should minimize as much as humanly possible, because, reasonable or not, it will get in people's way. But as a player, control what you can control. If you wait to be spoon-fed information about your individual weapon by the YouTube algorithm or a mid-level former teacher who makes Splatoon YouTube videos, you won't get as much information as someone who more actively seeks that information out by networking, sifting through Discord servers, looking for competitive Twitch streamers, and watching tournaments. I didn't want to make a series like Weapon Select when I first started on YouTube. My reasoning was that I'm not knowledgeable about every weapon in the game at a competitive level, so who am I to talk about how they should be played? I remember watching Dude's series where he'd focus on a particular weapon and talk about his ideas on how to play it, thinking, I know some of these better than he does, and losing some faith in it. If Dude, someone who's actually played at top level, is going to occasionally misinform someone about some of the weapons, I guarantee that I'm not going to be right about everything either. But when I became a creator, I realized that if people like me and Dude don't make those kinds of videos, nobody is going to watch anything by a competitive player at all when they try to learn them. I may not be a great Splatling player, but at least I know to tell people to wear run speed gear. I can't say that about a lot of the more casual YouTubers who have made guides on these weapons. If people were more resourceful about going out and finding tournament videos, though, I would be in less of a position to dictate how they play weapons that I don't use, and we'd all have a better understanding of the game than we do now. At the end of the day, whether you're in the Splatoon tournament organizer Illuminati, or you're just a player and Squid School enjoyer, it's important to focus on what you personally can control, instead of blaming somebody else for not doing their job to make this happen. You may be able to advocate for people to engage more in the scene and make it easier for people to have favorite top players, but as far as what actually gets done about it, you can only do what it's in your power to do. I think all of us can do a lot better at figuring out who to watch and getting more eyes on our scene for the sake of learning about the game, making friends and building community, preserving our history, and presenting ourselves in a more accessible way to the rest of the world.